The kind of morning that doesn't ask permission. That's what it was when Nora Ashby first walked into the wrong building on King Street West. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind that Toronto does better than anywhere else on Earth, where the maples have gone full fire and the lake wind comes off the water with just enough bite to remind you that winter is patient but not forgiving. She was already running 7 minutes late for a board presentation, which, for Nora, might as well have been running 40. She had standards, she had a reputation. She had, in the 12 years since she'd taken over Ashby Capital from her father, never once been late to anything that mattered. So naturally, the universe picked that morning. The revolving door of 180 King spun her out into the lobby of what was very clearly not the building she needed. Marble floors, yes. Reception desk, yes. But the logo on the wall said Meridian Community Partners, not Cavendish Group, and the woman behind the desk was looking at Nora with the particular patience of someone who had seen confused professionals in expensive coats approximately 900 times before. "I think," Nora said carefully, "I'm in the wrong place." "King West does that," the receptionist said. She had a warm face and a name tag that read Dot. "Which building do you need? 185. Cavendish, other side of the street, 2 doors east." Nora turned to go. And that's when she heard it, a soft, sharp intake of breath, the kind a child makes when they're trying very hard not to cry and losing the battle. She turned back. In the corner of the lobby, beside a row of chairs that looked like they'd been selected for durability rather than comfort, a little girl sat alone. She was maybe 7, maybe 8, with her knees pulled up to her chest and a backpack on her lap that was nearly as big as she was. Her eyes were dry, but barely, the kind of dry that requires effort. Nora Ashby, Chief Executive Officer, board meeting in 6 minutes, checked her watch. Then she looked back at the girl. Then she walked toward the chairs. This is the part where some people might say she had a choice. But people who say that have never actually seen a child sitting alone and pretending not to be scared. She sat down 2 seats away, not hovering, not looming, just present. "You okay?" she asked. The girl looked at her sideways. She had dark eyes and braids that were slightly coming loose on one side, like someone had done them carefully the night before and the day had already happened to them. "I'm waiting for my dad," she said. "Is he coming soon?" He said 15 minutes. She paused. "That was 22 minutes ago." Nora almost smiled. "You counted. I count things when I'm nervous." Said simply, without apology. A statement of fact. "That's smart," Nora said. "Actually." And she meant it. The girl looked at her more directly now. "You're wearing a really good coat, thank you. My dad says you can tell a lot about a person by their shoes, but I think it's their coat. Because shoes you wear because you have to. But coats are what you pick when you have options." Nora looked down at her coat, charcoal, cashmere, the one she'd bought herself the month after closing her first 9-figure deal because she had promised herself she would. "I think," she said slowly. "You might be right. I'm usually right," the girl said. "My dad says I get it from my mom." And something flickered across her face. Not grief exactly, but the shadow of it. The kind of shadow that becomes so familiar you stop noticing it until someone's watching you. Nora noticed it. "I'm Nora," she said. "Simone," the girl said. And then, with the gravity of someone doing a formal introduction, "Simone Janvier," carrying a paper bag in one hand and a travel mug in the other. And when he saw Simone, he exhaled the way you exhale when something you were trying not to think about turns out to be okay. Sorry. The line at the pharmacy took forever, and then the gardener." He stopped when he saw Nora, not the coat. The woman. His name was Declan Janvier. She would learn this approximately 30 seconds later after Simone said, "Dad, this is Nora. She kept me company," with the proprietary satisfaction of a child who has handled a situation and is now presenting the evidence. He was 40, maybe 41, with the kind of face that looked like it had been through something and hadn't tried to pretend otherwise. There were lines around his eyes that weren't from squinting in the sun. He was wearing a worn Carhartt jacket and work boots that had seen real work, and he was looking at Nora with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not suspicious, exactly. "Careful." "Declan Janvier," he said, shifting the paper bag to extend a hand. "Nora Ashby," she shook it. "She was just sitting here," Simone offered helpfully. "In the lobby. She was lost." "I was in the wrong building," Nora said. "Well," he looked at his daughter, then back at Nora. "Thank you for sitting with her." "She would have been fine," Nora said. "She told me she counts things when she's nervous." Something softened in his face, the particular softening of a parent hearing something true about their from a stranger's mouth. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She does. That should have been the end of it." Nora made it to the Cavendish building with 2 minutes to spare. She gave the presentation. She closed the deal. She had dinner that evening at a restaurant on Adelaide with 2 colleagues and a bottle of Bordeaux that cost more than most people's car payments, and she did not think about the girl with the counting habit or the man with the careful eyes. She told herself she didn't, anyway. The truth, and the thing about Nora, was that she had become very good at knowing when she was lying to herself, even if she wasn't always willing to stop. The truth was that the image of Simone's face when she mentioned her mother stayed with Nora all the way through the oysters and the second glass of wine and the cab ride home. She had a penthouse on the 34th floor of a building on Front Street, with a view of the lake that she had stopped actually looking at sometime around year 3 of living there. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that night and looked at the city lights and tried to remember the last time she had sat down next to someone just because they seemed like they needed company. She couldn't. The second time she saw him was at the Sororan Farmers Market on a Saturday morning 3 weeks later, and this time she almost didn't recognize him because he was laughing. It changed his face completely. He was crouched down beside a table of maple syrup, holding up 2 different bottles, and Simone was making the faces of someone being asked a very important question, and then she said something that made him laugh. A real laugh from somewhere deep, and Nora stopped walking without meaning to. He looked up. Their eyes met. The look on his face was careful again. But not unfriendly. "The woman who was lost," he said. "Still occasionally lost," she admitted. Simone appeared around the edge of the table. "Nora, Dad, it's Nora, remember?" "I remember," he said. There is a particular kind of embarrassment that comes not from doing something wrong, but from being seen doing something honest. Nora felt it now, standing in the middle of a farmer's market with maple syrup between them, being recognized by a child she had sat with for 8 minutes. "We're getting pancake stuff," Simone announced. "We make pancakes on Saturdays. It's a rule." "Is it?" Nora said. "Dad says some rules are just love wearing a schedule." She said this with complete confidence, as though she was sharing a well-known fact, and then she turned back to the maple syrup question as though the matter was settled. Nora looked at Declan. He was looking at his daughter with an expression that belonged in a painting. "She remembers everything," he said quietly, mostly to himself. "I can hear you," Simone said, without looking up. He glanced at Nora, and for a moment, just a moment, both of them were trying not to smile and failing. Here is what Nora knew about herself. She had built a successful company from a foundation her father had laid, and she had done it largely by understanding that sentiment is not the same as weakness, but that letting the wrong feelings into the wrong decisions could cost you more than money. She had learned this through her marriage to Graham, which had lasted 4 years and taught her, among other things, that some people love you most when you need them and some people love you best when you don't, and she was the second kind of person, which meant she had spent a lot of time with the first kind. She was 42. She had a good life. She had friends who were more like strategic alliances than anything else, and a mother in Kingston who called every Sunday and asked when she was going to slow down, and a corner office with a view, and a coat that a 7-year-old had correctly identified as chosen rather than required. She did not. She had decided some time ago need anyone new in her life. She kept running into Declan Janvier anyway. The third time was at a school fundraiser in the Junction that one of her junior analysts had roped her into attending as a community presence. She was standing by the silent auction tables, a weekend at a cottage in Muskoka, a dinner for 2, a watercolor portrait, when Simone materialized at her elbow. "You're everywhere," Simone said with the mild accusation of someone who has found something suspicious. "I was invited," Nora said. "Are you trying to win something?" "Dad's work is in the auction," she pointed. At the end of the table, there was a small placard beside something covered in brown paper. "Custom woodworking piece, handmade, donated by Janvier Woodcraft. He makes things," Simone said. "Furniture, mostly, and cabinets and stuff. But sometimes he makes things that aren't useful and are just beautiful, and those are his favorite. Which kind is this one?" "He didn't tell me. He said sometimes things are better when you let them be discovered." Nora looked at the covered piece. Then she put a bid on it. Declan found her by the coffee table 10 minutes later. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I wanted to," she said. "You don't even know what it is." "No," she agreed. "But your daughter said it might be beautiful." He looked at her for a long moment and then carefully, "Simone likes you. She has excellent taste," Nora said. "She told me I had a good coat." He almost smiled. "She's said that to exactly 2 people. You and her grade 2 coffee. She doesn't open up quickly. Since her mother died, she's been." He stopped. "Sorry, that's a lot to put on a conversation by a coffee table." "Don't apologize," Nora said. And she meant it. He looked at her again, that careful look, like he was adding something up. She was 34, said Yvonne. She died 18 months ago, ovarian cancer. Fast. He said it like someone who has told the story enough times that the words have worn smooth, but the weight is still there. Simone keeps a list of things her mom told her, so she doesn't forget. Nora said nothing for a moment. She told me she counts things when she's nervous. Yvonne did that too. He shook his head slightly. Some things you pass down without meaning to. She won the auction piece. It was a small carved maple tree. Not representational, not symbolic in any obvious way, just a tree rendered in wood so patiently that you could see the grain following the branches like something that had always been there, waiting to be found. She put it on her desk in the corner office. Her assistant asked where it came from. She said she'd found it at a fundraiser. This was true and also not the whole truth, which is how most things about Nora were organized. She called the number on the Janvier Woodcraft card 2 days later. She told herself it was about commissioning a custom piece for the Ashby Capitol lobby, which needed something, which she had been meaning to address for approximately 18 months. Both of those things were also true. Declan answered on the third ring. "This is Nora Ashby," she said. "I won the maple tree." A pause. "I know who you are," he said. "Simone told me your last name and I looked you up." This was not what she expected. Should I be flattered or concerned? Neither, he said, matter of fact. Just, I wanted to know who she'd been talking to. Another pause. She doesn't really talk to people. "I mentioned that. You did. You're a CEO. I am, of a company that manages." She heard the slight rustle of him reading something. 11 billion in assets, approximately, and you sat with my kid in a lobby for 8 minutes because she looked nervous. Nora found she didn't have a clean answer for that. She was counting, she finally said. I couldn't leave. The silence on the other end was different than the silences before it. Fuller. Somehow. "What did you want to commission?" he said at last. He came to the Ashby Capitol offices on a Thursday afternoon to look at the lobby. He wore the same Carhartt jacket, different boots, and he walked through the space the way someone walks through a space when they're actually looking at it rather than performing the act of looking. He crouched in one corner, ran his hand along the baseboards, looked up at the ceiling height. He said almost nothing for the first 10 minutes. Nora's assistant, a young man named Patrick who had impeccable instincts about almost everything, watched Declan from behind his desk with an expression of mild fascination and gave Nora a look that she chose to interpret as purely professional. "Walnut," Declan said eventually. "Floor-to-ceiling panel on the north wall. Not decorative, something structural looking, like it belongs." "That's exactly what I wanted," she said. "And I haven't told you what I wanted yet." He looked at her. "No," he said. "You didn't. There are moments in ordinary business meetings that are not technically ordinary. This was one of them, and both of them knew it, and neither of them said so, and Patrick very deliberately turned back to his computer. He started the work 3 weeks later. He came in the early mornings, before the office filled up, and Nora found herself arriving earlier than usual, which she acknowledged to herself with the calm honesty she reserved for things she had decided to stop arguing with. They talked while he worked. Not constantly. Not in the practiced way of people networking. The way two people talk when one of them is doing something with their hands and the other one has coffee, and neither of them has anywhere to be quite yet. She learned that he had grown up in New Brunswick, the son of a cabinet maker, that he had come to Toronto at 23 with a trade certificate and plans that had been reorganized entirely by meeting Yvonne at a Raptors watch party in a bar on Dundas and following her halfway across the country because, as he put it, some decisions don't feel like decisions at the time. That he had built Janvier Woodcraft from nothing over 12 years. That he went to Simone's school every Friday at lunch to eat with her because she had asked him to once and he had never stopped. Nora told him almost as much. About her father's company. About Graham. About the penthouse she'd bought for the view and stopped looking at. She was not, in ordinary life, someone who disclosed things. She was finding that the ordinary rules required a particular effort to maintain, and she was running low on that effort around Declan Janvier. "What's the last thing you did just because you wanted to?" he asked her one morning. No preamble. He was fitting a panel and not looking at her. "Commission this wall," she said. Before that, she thought about it. Actually thought. "I don't know," she said. "It's been a while." He nodded slowly. Said nothing. Which was, she was learning, sometimes his way of saying everything. The problem with Declan Janvier, and Nora was self-aware enough to find it funny that she had mentally labeled it a problem, was that he was not impressed by her. Not in the way she was used to, not in the way that meant she made him nervous or uncertain or eager to please. He treated her like a person, which was so specific and clarifying that it took her longer than she would have liked to recognize it for what it was. He brought Simone to the office one afternoon near the end of the project, a school PA day, because his usual sitter had canceled. Simone arrived and immediately began counting the panels on the wall her father had built, 11 on the bottom half, 9 on the top because of the window, and then announced she needed to use the washroom, and Patrick walked her down the hall with the solemnity of a head of state accompanying a dignitary. When they were briefly alone, Nora said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes," he said. "Why haven't you asked me out?" He looked at her steadily. "Because I didn't know if you wanted me to. I sat with your daughter in a lobby. I bought your tree. I commissioned a wall. I've been arriving 40 minutes early to my own office for 3 weeks." He said, very quietly, "Nora, what? Sometimes when people come from very different places, one person decides the distance is flattering and not something they'd actually want to close." She understood what he was saying. She understood it the way you understand something that hits the bruise you've been avoiding. "I'm not Graham," she said. And then, because she needed to say it clearly, "I'm not looking at you like a project or a story or something I found. I'm looking at you like—" She stopped, found the word, "like a person I want to know more of." He looked at her for a long moment, not checking her face for honesty exactly, more like letting what she'd said settle. "Simone's going to find out," he said at last. "When she does, she'll have opinions," Nora said. "I've seen her evaluate maple syrup." He almost smiled. It broke into a full one. And she had thought the laugh at the farmer's market was something, but this was something else entirely. "Friday," he said. "There's a place on Roncesvalles I've been meaning to go. Nothing fancy." "I don't need fancy," she said. He looked at her coat. "I know," he said, "but I appreciate you saying it." They told Simone on a Sunday morning. This was not planned. It was Simone who made it happen, as she had a habit of doing, by announcing at the pancake table that she had noticed things. "I noticed things," she said over her second pancake, "like how Nora's number is in your phone under N instead of her whole name, which is what you do when someone is important, and how you smile at your phone sometimes when you're cooking, and how you got a haircut last week and didn't tell me you were getting one." Declan put down his fork. "I also notice," Simone continued very carefully, "that Nora is the first person in a long time who you talk about like you're thinking about her at the same time." There was a silence. "Would it be okay with you?" Declan asked, quietly, like the question was the most important thing in the room, which it was. Simone considered this with the seriousness it deserved. She turned her fork over once. She looked at her pancake. She said, "Mom used to say that good people don't always come in groups. Sometimes they come one at a time and you have to pay attention or you'll miss them." She looked at her father. "I think," she said, "we should pay attention. On a Tuesday in March, exactly 5 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days after a wrong turn off King Street West. Not that anyone was counting, except possibly Simone." Nora stood at the windows of her penthouse and looked at the lake. She looked at it for a long time. The city below was still doing what cities do, indifferent and enormous and full of people in buildings making decisions and missing each other and finding each other and missing each other again. The lake caught the late afternoon light and threw it back in pieces. She had not, she realized, stopped looking at this view. She had just needed something worth turning away from it for, so that turning back meant something again. She had a dinner reservation on Roncesvalles. She had a coat she'd chosen on purpose. She had a voicemail from Simone that said, with the crisp authority of someone who has given the matter considerable thought, "I've decided you can call me see Simone because I already know you're good." She put on her coat. She went to dinner. And outside, the maples were starting to show the first faint green of something that had been waiting all winter, quiet and patient and exactly sure of itself, in the way that only things with deep roots can be.